The first thing Daniel heard was the scream of twisting metal, sharp, violent, and far too close. It tore through the quiet afternoon like a blade, followed by the deafening crash of something heavy slamming into concrete. His wrench slipped from his hand, clattering against the stained floor of his small auto shop as he froze for a split second, heart pounding against his ribs. Then instinct took over. He ran. The late sun burned orange across the empty street as he burst outside, the smell hitting him before the sight did, burning rubber, leaking fuel, something metallic and wrong. Just 20 yards ahead, a sleek black luxury car had smashed sideways into a light pole, its front crumpled like paper, smoke rising in slow, ominous spirals. And inside, someone was still there. "Hey, can you hear me?" Daniel shouted, already sprinting toward the wreck. Have you ever felt that moment where your body moves before your mind catches up? Where fear exists, but it doesn't matter. That was him now. The driver's side door was jammed, bent inward from the impact. Through the cracked windshield, he could see a woman slumped over the steering wheel, long dark hair partially covering her face. Blood traced a thin line down her temple, disappearing into the collar of her elegant coat. She didn't move. Stay with me, he muttered under his breath, gripping the twisted metal handle. He yanked once, nothing. Again, still nothing. Smoke thickened. Come on, he growled, bracing his foot against the frame and pulling with everything he had. The door groaned, resisting, until finally it gave way with a harsh screech. He reached inside, careful but fast, checking her pulse. Faint, but there. Relief hit him like a wave. Okay, you're alive, he whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. For a brief second, her gaze found his, dazed, unfocused, but searching. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Then her head fell sideways again. Sirens echoed in the distance now. Daniel exhaled shakily, easing her out just enough to keep her airway clear, careful not to move her too much. He stayed there, kneeling on the asphalt, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. He had seen accidents before. Fixed cars that looked worse than this. But something about this moment, about her, felt different. Strange, unsettling, like a memory trying to surface, but not quite reaching. Minutes later, paramedics rushed in, voices sharp and urgent. They took over, lifting her onto a stretcher, attaching oxygen, checking vitals. You saved her life, one of them said quickly as they worked. Daniel nodded absently, stepping back, his hands suddenly feeling heavy. He watched as they loaded her into the ambulance, the doors slamming shut with finality. And just like that, she was gone. The street fell quiet again. Only the wreck remained. Daniel stood there for a long moment, staring at the crushed luxury car, something gnawing at him from deep inside. Have you ever looked at a stranger and felt like your past was staring back at you? He shook his head, dismissing the thought. Just adrenaline, he muttered. But even as he turned and walked back into his shop, the feeling didn't leave. It stayed. 2 days later, the car arrived. Not the wrecked shell he had seen, but what remained of it, carefully transported on a flatbed truck, gleaming black paint still intact in places where the crash hadn't destroyed it. It was expensive, ridiculously so. The kind of car people didn't just own, they flaunted. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag as he stepped outside, squinting at the polished emblem. Client wants full restoration, the delivery guy said, handing over paperwork. Money's not an issue. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Money's never the issue for people like that, he replied quietly. The man shrugged. You're the only one she asked for. Daniel paused. She, he repeated. Yeah, owner of the car. Big CEO or something. Don't know the name, but, she insisted. A strange tension tightened in Daniel's chest. Insisted, he asked. Yeah, said, the man who pulled me out, he fixes it. For a moment, the world seemed to still. Daniel looked back at the car. Then at the papers in his hand. His name was written there. Specifically, deliberately. Why would she remember him? People in shock didn't usually recall details like that. Something about this didn't make sense. All right, he said finally, his voice steady despite the unease creeping in. Leave it here. As the truck drove off, Daniel circled the car slowly, inspecting the damage. The front end was nearly destroyed. Internal components crushed. Electronics fried. It was a nightmare job. Weeks of work, minimum. Maybe more. But that wasn't what bothered him. It was the feeling. That same strange pull from before. Like something unfinished. Like a story he had forgotten, but was about to remember. Inside the shop, tools clinked softly as he got to work, the familiar rhythm calming his thoughts. He dismantled parts, examined the engine, noted everything that needed replacing. Hours passed, the world outside faded, until, "Daddy," a small voice broke through the silence. Daniel glanced up to see his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, standing at the entrance, her backpack slipping off one shoulder. "You're home early," he said, wiping grease from his hands as he walked over. "Teacher had a meeting," she replied, smiling faintly. Then her eyes shifted toward the car. "Whoa, that's fancy," he chuckled softly. "Yeah, it is." She stepped closer, peering at it with wide curiosity. "Is it broken bad?" she asked. "Very bad," he admitted. She nodded seriously, as if understanding something much bigger than her years. "Will you fix it?" "I always try," he said. She looked up at him then, her expression softening. "You always fix things," she said quietly. Something in her tone made his chest tighten. Not everything, he thought. But he just smiled. "Come on, let's get you something to eat." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Daniel returned to the shop. The air was colder now. Quieter. He stood in front of the car, staring at it under the dim overhead light. Something about it still felt wrong. Not the damage, something deeper. He opened the driver's side door, now partially repaired, and leaned inside. The scent of expensive leather mixed faintly with something else, something almost familiar. His eyes moved across the interior. Then stopped. On the dashboard, a small, nearly invisible engraving near the edge. 3 letters. D+A. His breath caught. "No," he whispered. His fingers hovered over it, not quite touching. Memories flickered at the edges of his mind. A laugh, a voice, a promise. But it was impossible. That was years ago. Another life. Another version of him. He stepped back quickly, shaking his head. "It's a coincidence," he muttered. It had to be, didn't it? But deep down, something was already breaking through the walls he had built around his past. And he knew, without understanding how, that this car, this woman, this moment, was about to change everything. And somewhere, far from his quiet shop, in a private hospital room filled with silence and unspoken memories. The woman from the crash slowly opened her eyes. Her lips moved faintly, barely a whisper, but clear enough. "Daniel." The name lingered in the sterile hospital room long after it left her lips, like a fragile thread connecting 2 lives that had been torn apart and buried under years of silence. "Daniel." She whispered it again, softer this time, as if afraid the sound might break the moment. A nurse nearby glanced up. "Ma'am, are you trying to say something?" But the woman closed her eyes again, her breathing uneven, her fingers tightening slightly against the white sheets. The past wasn't just a memory, it was a storm, rising fast, breaking through carefully built walls. And far away, in a small, grease-stained garage, the man she had called by name stood frozen in front of a broken car, unaware that his world had already begun to shift. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The engraving wouldn't leave his mind. D+A. He had traced those same letters once, years ago, not on metal, but on the condensation of a cafe window while she laughed beside him, teasing him for being too sentimental. He had wiped it away quickly back then, embarrassed. But she hadn't. She had leaned in, smiling, and written it again. D+A. Now it's permanent, she had said. Have you ever tried to forget someone so deeply that even their name feels dangerous? Daniel had done exactly that. Or at least, he thought he had. He leaned against the workbench, rubbing his face with both hands, exhaustion mixing with something far more unsettling. "Ava," he said under his breath. The name felt foreign, and yet, painfully familiar. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. "It can't be." But deep down, he already knew. The next morning came too quickly. Lily sat at the small kitchen table, swinging her legs slightly